Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about something that I especially enjoy, and that's service management. So it's called ITIL. I'm from Indiana. I call it ITIL, but I think it's actually ITIL. Let's see. Agenda. What is ITIL? What does it mean? Why is it important? Why would a company want to consider using ITIL? What is the impact on an organization? And so as we think about implementing ITIL, it can radically change an organization. It's a whole new paradigm, a whole new way of looking at things from an IT perspective. What are critical success factors, and what are the components of ITIL? Just out of curiosity, how many people here, show of hands, how many people are in IT? Ah, okay, so about 30% maybe. Okay, anybody ever heard of ITIL? Oh, well, that's a lot more people. That's surprising. Okay, key points that I hopefully am able to get across this evening. ITIL is all about the business. It's very easy for IT to get disconnected from the business and kind of lose its way and not be able to link its purpose to the company's goals. And very basic to basic to ITIL is it's about the business. It views IT as a service, and so many of us in IT are familiar with the idea that we validate applications, we may qualify hardware, but a service is a new way of looking at things. It pulls things together in a unique way, so it's almost a third layer. And it's the next level of IT, and so we see a lot of companies, both directly in IT, such as HP, IBM, as well as companies using IT, adopting ITIL. It provides a common language, a common framework that many companies can use as they work together. So ITIL, to be honest, it's misleading. Stands for Information Technology Infrastructure Library, which is actually a misnomer. It may have started that way in its early days. It's really about service management. Let's see. Whoops. What is going on here? I have a new Windows 8 machine here, so I'm trying to figure out how to use this. OGC, the Office of Government Commerce, is out of the UK, and they are the organization that developed ITIL as part of a much more comprehensive framework. I realize that's an eye chart. Let me just state, many of the slides that I have will be eye charts. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to hit everything on every one. But some of the points that are in here are project management, program management, risk management, service management, portfolio management, and goes on. And so ITIL dovetails with a much broader framework of frameworks. So we have to start with the definition. ITIL is all about service management. Specifically, what is a service? And so services are a means of delivering value. And so if we think about IT, how many companies, and this is a rhetorical question, but how many companies are able to state what the value of their IT is? Not very many. There's a disconnect. And so services are a means of delivering value to customers by facilitating the outcomes that customers want to achieve without the ownership of specific costs and risks. And so that last part is actually speaking to a lot of the outsourcing or partnering that's going on in the industry. Companies are discovering that, gee, we may be in business to provide a particular product or even a particular service. That is our main focus. And oh, by the way, we have to have IT. We don't necessarily want to invest in IT. We don't necessarily want to invest in training people. And so that's what this is speaking to, is not necessarily taking on the ownership of specific costs and risks. Services facilitate outcomes by enhancing the performance of associated tasks and reducing the effects of constraints. So very few companies have unlimited funds. Very few companies have unlimited people. And so the question is, what's your purpose in life? What's your company's mission? That's where you want to put your resources. Let's leverage things, let's leverage other companies. Now I'm speaking specifically to partnering, but this can also occur even within. 3 types of sourcing exist within the ITIL framework. The first is at a department level or a very small company level. And so that would be, perhaps you have a manufacturing IT totally dedicated to manufacturing. The second level would be global or common, and so that would be shared IT across an organization. A lot of times administrative functions fall into that. So purchasing might be an example. The third type of service then would be outsourced or partnering with other companies. And so by partnering with another company, that company can remove constraints. So if you think about a company building its own data center and everything that goes along with the data center, that can be very expensive. It's very time consuming, requires a huge amount of expertise. Well, if you partner with another company that specializes in it, then you removed a constraint. And so that's what this is speaking to with the constraint. These constraints may include regulation, lack of funding or capacity, technology limitations. So like technology limitations, it's expensive. Technology is constantly updating now. I mean, if you've got something 6 months old, it's ancient. Not many companies can afford to continually upgrade their IT like that. And so by partnering with a company, they're able to do it and maybe support 100 or 1,000 other companies with a set of technology. The end result is an increase in the probability of desired outcomes. These would be the outcomes that the business wants. While some services enhance the performance of tasks, others have a more direct impact. They may perform the task itself. There are some references that I have in here. ITIL Service Strategy, page 13. So there are 5 life cycle stages that are part of ITIL. Service strategy is considered to be the first of the 5. Strategy, design, transition, operations, and continual service improvement are the 5. Underneath the high-level services, then, there are what are known as supporting services. And so you may have an IT may provide a service such as collaboration. That's something the business is interested in. Underneath it, maybe buried a couple of layers, there may be building servers that support collaboration services. That would be an example of a supporting service. So why do you want service management? So what we did is we talked about services in general, what are services, now what is service management. I'm not going to hit all of these. I'm assuming people can read that. But deliver value for customers through services, manage the risk, partially because we're partnering with companies or we may be working with areas of the business that actually specialize, say, in risk or knowledge. Changing the organizational culture to support the achievement of sustained success. So oftentimes in IT, we get buried in applications and building servers and running network cable and all of the pieces that IT needs. What this does is it says, no, wait a minute, we're doing this for the business, and it's an organizational shift to tie IT to the business. I'm going to skip this one. So everybody in this room knows this next slide. I'm just going to state it so we can have a common playing field. Any kind of business process, let me start that again. Businesses run off processes, and so they've got all sorts of processes. Gee, I need to create a purchase order. What's the process to create a purchase order? I'm not talking about the IT application, but from a business perspective, how do I get a purchase order authorized? How do I get that created? What are the tools that I need? How are people trained? All of this is at the business level. So there are various inputs. There's some kind of value add that the business does, perhaps using some IT tools in that process. And out of that, there come different types of outputs. Those are generally classified into products and services. So if you're a manufacturing company, you're probably producing some kind of product. There's something tangible. ITIL is very clear in saying it's all about services. Services are different than products, obviously. Whereas a product, say a computer, you can put those on a shelf and stockpile them, and demand can fluctuate, and you just pull them off the shelf as you need. You can do things in advance. Services, you can't do that. So if you're running a help desk and you have problems, trouble tickets, incidents, all the same thing, you can't really stockpile solutions. That service has to be executed when it's needed. So that's one of the differences between products and services. ITIL is very clear that it is focused on services. Quality ensures consistency and predictability of all aspects throughout the business. Businesses use services to transform inputs into outputs, aspects of services. And so this is a little bit of what I was just speaking to. So timeliness, accuracy, courtesy, responsiveness, completeness, availability. You can read the details if you're interested. Availability, variety, personalized service, convenience, ambience. These are all aspects of services that you probably would not find with products. And so all of these things distinguish services from products and are part of ITIL. Business is comprised of a sequenced set of business processes. So those processes start to get linked together, all from a business perspective, and IT then comes in and supports that. So let's think, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to do a little bit of a change in direction, but these will come back together. Growth of IT. So companies start small. Every company started small. And when you're a small company, it's very easy to, if you're a company of 10 people, you can look across the table and you say, I need this. And so the communication is pretty good. As a company grows, though, departments start to spring up, complexity increases, communication increases, things slow down. And then you start to get little pockets developing independent of each other, and all of a sudden you're not communicating anymore. So how many people are familiar with CMMI? Okay, very good. I need to wipe my forehead here. Excuse me. Okay, so we have a lot of people here familiar with CMMI, which is great. And so I particularly like this model because it dovetails nicely. I just lost my microphone. It dovetails nicely with ITIL. So as companies start small, they would be a level 1. And so, can I use does that show up? No, that does not show up. Okay. So they start at a level 1, so things are pretty ad hoc. You have a lot of heroes coming in. They can make miracles happen, but it's not repeatable. And if you lose somebody critical to the company, you're really in trouble. And so that would be a level 1. Level 2, you start to get some basic project management, you get some basic processes in place, but there's inconsistency among groups, both in terms of complexity of the documents and processes. Actually, I'll just stop with that. Level 3, you start to get some process standardization, but it's not necessarily consistent across the entire thing. When companies start to look at ITIL, they're often at a level 3. So if a company has reached level 3, there are times that, we need some kind of incident or problem or trouble ticket management. And so, but it's often done at a department level, often done at an application level. Consistency is an issue. And so if leadership wants to get some basic numbers on like a dashboard or a scorecard, how are we doing? Can't do it because all the departments, they may have processes, but they're different and they're running perhaps under different tools, and you can't do it. With levels 4 and 5, it starts to come together. And so whereas level 3 may just be able to handle incidents and problems and perhaps some change management, levels 4 and 5 start to introduce all the strategy elements, all the design elements, and you get consistency across the organization that now allows leadership in big corporations to get a scorecard, a dashboard that says, this is what's important to my business owners, and this is where we stand on the issues. So ITIL is a framework. So I know we have a lot of people here with a lot of different certifications. So that ITIL is not a standard, it's a framework. And so what that means is it provides a framework that IT organizations can use in terms of interacting and operating, but it's not to the level of a standard. ISO 20000, which I'm going to speak to in a couple minutes, ISO 20000 actually is a standard, and there are 3 sections to ISO 20000. You open it up, page 2, you see the ITIL processes. And so ISO 20000 was specifically designed with ITIL in mind. They dovetail beautifully. So it's a framework. Small businesses may use individual processes such as incidents, problems, changes to keep their businesses stable. So the point that I'm making with this slide is you don't have to be a large corporation to use ITIL. You could be a very small company, you could be a nonprofit, you could be a government agency, it doesn't matter. You just would implement certain processes but not the entire suite. Medium businesses want to integrate processes, and then large, you can read. Critical success factors. This comes from the pink elephant, so I like to give credit where credit needs to be given. So critical success factors. So a company starts to, there will be ITIL consultants that go in, talk to company leadership and say, this is why you need to ITIL, to use ITIL. And so leadership starts to get sold on it, and it starts to ripple through the organization a little bit. The question is then, what are the critical success factors that will make this work? So you need strong support from leadership. If you don't have strong support from leadership, it's not going to work. Does that apply to most things? Yeah. Resources. This is something that's easily underestimated. Undertaking ITIL is a big thing. But it will also yield big benefits. Knowledge and skill, critical success factor. Integrated tools. So whereas levels 1, 2, and 3 maybe had tools and maybe some spreadsheets and things to track problems and changes, you need an integrated tool. And there are a variety of integrated tools that are available on the market now. Some you can host in-house and some are cloud-based. Ability to deploy, ability to affect behavioral change. As I've mentioned, this is not just implementing a tool. It's a whole different mindset. So you may have a layer of infrastructure and platforms. You may have a layer of applications. What ITIL does is it pulls these together into services then that the business can recognize and actually order. And program momentum. So the life cycle stages. ITIL adds some service knowledge, but overall it actually does not add that much overhead to the IT department. It's just that it gets categorized differently. And so rather than thinking about application A, B, C, D, these start to get pulled together in different ways to form services. And so it's just adding a layer, and that's what the ITIL view is. It takes that service view. Actually, that's ITIL and service. IT, on the other hand, if they are an Oracle database group, they really don't care about the service per se to the business. They're interested in, gee, I've got to get this database up and running, or I've got a problem with this database and I'm going to get the database running. Absolutely important. It's not that one of these levels is better than another. They're all needed and they all work in concert. The business view, the business doesn't care at all about a database. They don't care at all about servers. What they care about is, can I get my job done? Again, so the same information would get pulled together, but with a different business view. So you end up potentially with different scorecards and different dashboards. They should be pulling from the same detailed information, though, so it's presenting a consistent story. So what we have, I wish there were a way I could point. That just is not showing up there. Okay, so in the center, this wheel chart is generally considered the primary diagram for ITIL. In the middle is service strategy. And so at strategy, a company's IT leadership is working with the business leadership to understand what are the high-level services that IT needs to provide to the business. And so these would be things like collaboration services, workplace services, in other words, providing PCs or iPads or whatever devices you may have. So service strategy is looking at very high-level services. Gartner recommends that you have something on the order of maybe 10. So if you're looking at a major corporation at that level, at the service strategy level, you're only looking at maybe 10 services. Again, they're pretty high level: workplace services, collaboration services, those kinds of things. So service strategy is the governance that says, yes, we want these services, now go forth and figure out how to do it. So the high-level requirements, business requirements, are handed off to the service design area. The service design area takes those and breaks them into all the various components. So that's where the system requirements, user requirements, technical requirements start to come into play. Those all get fleshed out. The architecture gets fleshed out as needed. The reason I say as needed, if you're doing it in-house, then yeah, you have to do all of that yourself. If you're working with a partner company and you're doing a software as a service or a platform as a service, then a lot of that would be skipped over fairly quickly because you've probably done some kind of site assessments and those kinds of things that would take that place. So service design is where service catalog is figured out. So what is it that the business would order? Service levels. Everybody heard of SLAs? Service level agreements and operational level agreements. So SLAs would be, gee, I put in an order for a new device for my work, and I expect my new device to appear within 2 days. That's an SLA that the business would expect. OLAs, on the other hand, are agreements between IT groups, probably at different levels. So I need a database, I need a server, probably more along the lines of IT groups talking with each other. Then it kind of leaves idle. So service design ends up creating a service design package with all of the details that are needed in order to implement this service, composed of one or more applications, composed of varying degrees of infrastructure, whatever is needed. It gets handed off potentially in-house. You go to an external party to actually build it then. That actually falls outside ITIL. So the development, perhaps more design, the testing, and the final validation may actually happen outside ITIL. Then comes back in, and we enter service transition. Service transition is where the development group, who did all that work that I just mentioned, make sure that it meets what the business actually needs, or what the next level up actually needs. And so that's where a different kind of testing will occur, depending on whether you're regulated or not regulated. That documentation will vary to a large degree. So service transition. Release and deploy also fits into that. So how do I bundle changes together? What's the deployment plan? These things can also happen in service transition. Then once everything is authorized, everything is validated, qualified, whatever terms you want to use, and it's ready to go live, there's some kind of service acceptance that occurs. Service acceptance is a little different than the validation and the platform qualification because this is a service level. So you may have a help desk, you may have a help desk, a service desk, you may have knowledge articles that need to be created that support that service desk. Lots of components go into the service operation. There's a service acceptance report then that's often done, and that report indicates, yes, all of the elements across all the applications, across all the infrastructure, all of that is ready to go. People are trained, the help desk is trained, as needed, hardware has been deployed, we're ready to go. So then it's handed off to operations. Not quite that black and white, but it's good enough for this. So it's handed off to operations, and it's in operations then that the next level up, whether it's an IT customer or a business customer, that's where they start to see and can order whatever service that is. Okay? So service strategy is the first of the 5, they're called life cycle stages. Service strategy, business processes have defined needs. Again, this is our link to the business. What is it that the business wants? Many of these needs are met by IT services. Service strategy determines at a high level what IT services are needed, takes the form of the service portfolio. So again, Gartner would say at the service portfolio level, you've only probably got 10. So if you think about, Fortune 500 companies, there are only like 10 IT services in the portfolio. There are a lot of drill downs off those 10. Patterns of business activities. So for example, if you've got a financial application, I'm willing to bet that most financial departments will say, November, December, don't do any changes. Too much risk associated with the change going in, can't do end of year financials, you've got serious problems. And so understanding how is my customer, whether it's one level up or however many levels up, how is my customer going to use this? Those are the patterns of business activity. Financial management is obviously the financial side. So those are actually the first 3 there are actually processes that occur within service strategy. In addition to that then, I wanted to highlight that dashboards are defined at this level then. And so when you think about a CIO, perhaps even a CEO, what is it that he or she is interested in? What are the critical things? It may be security, it may be delivery of financial reports, it may be whatever it is. Those are the things that are going to go on the scorecards and dashboards. And those are defined at the strategy level. Service design then will figure out how am I going to create the numbers that I need to support the scorecards and dashboards. Transition then will test to make sure that yes, those metrics can be gathered. Operations will create them. Continuous service improvement then gathers them up and gives them back to the portfolio. So we end up with an ongoing cycle. IT governance, specifying decision rights and decision-making mechanisms. So this is still within the service strategy. Decision-making mechanisms to foster the desired behavior and the use of IT. So it's kind of interesting. Servers and data centers are very expensive. And so IT can actually influence the business. Gee, if we can produce these reports for you during off hours, we can do it for less cost, and that may help certain departments out. And so those patterns of business activity can actually be influenced even at the governance level. To help understand, design, and communicate effective IT governance, decision rights, accountability framework can be constructed that answers questions such as what decisions must be made, who will be making the decisions, what information will the person possess, who is accountable, and how is the decision outcome to be measured. I realize this is an eye chart. I don't look for anybody to go through it, and I'm not going through it. What I do want to highlight, though, is that when we think about putting together a service, it's actually a very complicated process. So if I think about collaboration services, there's a lot that has to go into it. And so there will be defining stage. I can't read this. That's how much of an eye chart this is. Process initiation, define, analysis, approve, and charter, along with a fairly detailed flow in order to bring a new service into being. Because we're in strategy is not interested in what applications you're going to use. Service strategy is not interested in what tools are you going to use. What they're interested in, what are the business requirements? How do we meet the business needs? Okay, the strategy level, that's what's important. The next life cycle stage, service design, is what will detail out the IT details that we normally know of. The key focus is business need. So ITIL breaks services then into 2 aspects, utility and warranty. Utility is the functionality. So these are the basic things that the various applications, the various infrastructure will need to do in order to meet the service needs. Warranty, on the other hand, ensures that that service will continue to produce whatever the functionality pieces are. And so it's interested in things like security, capacity, availability, business continuity. So in IT, we often think in terms of disaster recovery. In ITIL training, they're very quick to say, we don't like disaster recovery as business continuity. So just a little piece there, and a little diagram kind of shows how these operate together. And so the first are the utilities. So is the performance supported and the constraints removed? You'll notice that those are pieces that came out of the service definition. So that's the utility side. The warranty side, is there enough availability, capacity, continuous, and secure? If the utility is met, then it's considered to be fit for purpose. It will meet the business needs. If the warranty aspects are met, then it's fit for use. It can be used. Then value is created. This chart is right out of the ITIL books. Services are comprised then, as you break it down into varying degrees of detail, we have services and sub-services and sub-sub-services and IT departments supporting each other, but eventually you get down to applications and tools, and those are a couple of the pieces that services need, basically broken into capabilities and resources. And so under the capabilities, these are let me start with the other. So under the resources, we're talking financial capital, so the money, basic infrastructure, I need some pieces of hardware, applications, information, and people. And this is number of people. It doesn't really necessarily speak to the skill level. From an ITIL perspective, the resources are important because these are fairly easy to gather. You can go out to the open market and you can get these things fairly easily. And you can scale these up and you can scale these down because they're fairly easy to procure. Capabilities, on the other hand, are differentiated because they're much more difficult. They have to be developed over time. And so management isn't something, you can't just bring in a new management team very easily. It takes time to develop management. It takes time to develop an organization, an organizational structure. It takes time to develop processes and train people on processes, everything that goes around the processes. It develops, capabilities have knowledge, and so whereas the resources had information, information is considered to be little bits of almost data running around. Knowledge pulls the information into something that's useful. And again, people shows on both lists. This time the people refers to knowledgeable people in your company, in your processes, in the skills that you need. That takes time. So this is actually speaking to leadership, roles and responsibilities, organizational change management. The processes would be made up of standard operating processes, job aids, and other things. Knowledge would be things like libraries and knowledge bases, those kinds of things. So you can see what I'm trying to explain is we have lots of different levels here, more and more detail as we go deeper into it. It's important because we start at the top, we work our way down. A lot of IT organizations, and I've seen a lot of IT organizations start at the bottom and go up. When we do that, we can't, it's next to impossible to connect back to the business. The business comes back and says, you know, I just gave you $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, $1 billion, I don't know, you state your number, and leadership wants to know, did I get value for my money? And IT can say, well, yeah, we gave you what you wanted, but leadership is left with a question that says, well, I just gave you X dollars, could I have gotten that in the open market for cheaper? Am I getting value for my money? Did I overspend? The reverse is also true. If we can't state the value, then the business could be giving IT too little money. They're starving IT in an attempt to save money, and when they do that, the technology may fall behind, and they may lose some competitive edge as a result, and then they start losing business. And so it's it helps both increase and decrease. Okay, so this actually has a little, this actually has a little bit of the levels in here again. And so we have business processes, using applications, and I highlight here that type 1, type 2 providers may be used here at this point. Those applications are sitting on platforms. Platforms are sitting on, and so a platform would be something like a database, it could be a web hosting, something like that. Infrastructure, data centers, and a service. I have highlighted here in the yellow service A, B, C, D. So we have different services, and these different layers are coming together in different ways. And then fairly new, I mean really largely within the last 5 years or so, cloud has come in. Cloud is a huge piece interacting with all of this. And this would also be, I have this under service design now, so I've moved away from strategy and I moved into design. And so design starts to think through, gee, I understand what the business needs are. Those have been handed off to service design now, life cycle stage. How do I pull all of this stuff together to make sure there's enough capacity, there's enough availability, there's enough security, all of the utility and warranty aspects, the functionality that we needed, all of those are now coming together in service design and will end up in a service design package. So a service design package has service catalog details, so when customers want to use these services, how do they access the services? What are the technical designs? And so there may be architectural review boards involved in this. Unique applications and tools may be needed for any given service. Training, what are the critical success factors, key performance indicators, which leads into what are the operational metrics and measures. All sorts of validation plans may be needed. So there's validation, release and deploy, test, security, operations, continuity, and it goes on and on and on. A lot of this depends on whether you're in a regulated industry or not. If you're not in a regulated industry, my guess is you probably don't need a lot. We happen to be in a regulated industry. If you're not in a regulated industry, on the one hand, you can get by without a lot of this documentation, but on the other hand, if you lose key people, your company could be in serious trouble. If people retire, if people quit, if there's a layoff, whatever reason, somebody gets sick, that company could be in serious trouble if it's not supported with appropriate documentation. I'm preaching to the choir. Okay. Okay, functions impact. So what I've been speaking to in terms of the major life cycle stages, which are service strategy, service design, service transition, service operation, and continuous service improvement, they're also functions. And so functions kind of thought of as departments. And so the functions there are 4 functions that are identified by ITIL. The service desk, otherwise known as a help desk in a lot of companies, IT operations, technical, and applications. Service readiness is a new element that's introduced with ITIL. And so I know for many years I've worked in various departments where we would implement an application. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm very close to my business customers, and so I know when things are ready. But with a service, you're probably talking about a lot of applications. You're potentially talking a lot of companies, a lot of people all coming together, and so all of a sudden service readiness becomes it becomes a big deal. How do I make sure that I have the knowledge articles that have been created to support the service desk? How do I know that the service desk agents have been trained? So all of that would fit under kind of a service readiness aspect. Let's see. I'm going to skip this in the interest of time. I'd like to leave some time for questions, and so I'm going to skip some of these slides. So monitoring, I've mentioned a couple times, service scorecard and service dashboard. Difference between them, let's see. Point-in-time information for the service scorecard, real-time information for the service dashboard. And so one is generally how is the service doing? Is it providing what it needs to provide? The other would be what are the problems? What are the kinks in the system? Those are made up of key performance indicators, and those come from lower level metrics. As I work with a variety of companies, what I see is metrics are produced. And they may be things like server uptime. Does a business really care about server uptime? No, they don't. Is that an important metric? Yes, absolutely. IT needs that from an operational perspective, but the business really doesn't care about, gee, you had 99.6% uptime. What I care about is I need to create a purchase order. Is the system up and available? Can I create my purchase order? And just a side note, anybody here certified in COBIT? Okay, so COBIT can provide guidance for governance and control. So this is actually a nice diagram because you can actually see the four life cycle stages. So we have strategy, design, transition, operation, with the service portfolio, which is the service strategy, being the cylinder along the side. And so what we see is service strategy. Some of the key deliverables would be what are the strategies, the policies, resources and constraints, change proposals, and service charters. Those are coming out of the service strategy. Service design is producing service design, architecture standards, service design packages that will be handed off to a deployment group. Again, that falls outside of ITIL. Comes back in once it's been developed, and we move into service transition. And so that's monitoring new, changed, and retired services. It's interested in testing from a business perspective, as well as an internal IT perspective. Service knowledge management updates, implementation of transition plans. So how are we going to implement whatever the new change is, whatever the new service is. And then operation. And so we have achievements against targets and operational and life services, with the idea that because we started with what does the business need, what are those initial requirements, we have business value that we can now speak to. Things roll up because we started by going down. Some of these are all I don't want to say all, these are most of the processes that are within ITIL. And so you see service strategy, design, transition, operation. This particular chart put CSI at the beginning. So some of them are unique, so service portfolio exists only within service strategy, but other things like change management span all of the life cycle stages. I know when I was first learning ITIL, I thought, well, change management is within transition, and so I'm really just going to focus on that one aspect. But in fact, anytime there's a change, it could be to the portfolio, it could be to a design, it could be to how we're going to test, it could be within operations, it could be how we're going to produce metrics. All of that occurs through change management. Service asset and configuration management. So you can see what the various processes are with it. I kind of like this because it's a nice colorful chart. The service operations, and so what I did, next two slides, kind of look at service operations then from two aspects. One is I have a service now that went through the portfolio, it went through design, it went through transition, it's now operational, and now let's use it. And so I need a PC. That would be an example of a service catalog item, and what would I do? So we have we have request fulfillment, and that request fulfillment, I need a PC. That may in turn trip off a whole workflow behind it. Some of the new tools are pretty fancy in their automated workflows, and so there may be change requests because with that new PC you probably have a new asset, and that asset needs to be tracked. And so there are change requests, the SACM needs to be updated, the configuration management database of how that asset is configured needs to be updated. Let's see, so and all of that is sitting on applications and platforms, and there are events that are then being tracked. And in a positive sense, that means, gee, I just pinged a new server and it's responding back. So server is up. That would be an example of a positive event. I don't need to take action on it. It's an event that's being tracked by the system and everything is okay. This would be a nice picture of a service that is working exactly the way it needs to work. All of this stuff then is operating, feeding continual service improvement, feeding the dashboards, feeding the scorecards, going back to the service strategy, going back to leadership at the appropriate level. The next one is the problem. So my PC just broke, or there's another issue of some sort. So service operation has an interruption. There's an interruption in service, or it's slow. Both of those are considered incidents within ITIL. So at that point, we have, in the middle, we have some kind of incident being reported to a service desk. Ideally, that's one single service desk for the company. It depends on where you are on the ITIL learning curve. But that's going to the service desk. It's relying on knowledge articles that are sitting in the knowledge management area. Depending on the number, there could be problems that are created from the incidents. Problems are simply ways to pull incidents together into, gee, let me find a single root cause analysis. One of the subjects that's coming up in here in a couple months, according to Elizabeth, root cause analysis. So let's understand what the root cause is and fix that problem. Out of that, there may be change requests that need to be created, and there can be changes that happened, and validation and testing occurs then. Okay, just a couple more slides. Further information for those who want. These are some URLs, so itil-officialsite.com, cabinetoffice.gov.uk. If you're interested in these, I can get them to you. Just let me know. This would actually be the primary one. And then New Horizons is a company that's local. I'm not going to recommend them, but they are a company that provides training. I'm not going to recommend. I'm not going to not recommend. Okay, I'm just stating this for your information. They are a company that provides local training on ITIL, as well as a lot of other certifications. The ITIL books themselves, there are 5 of them, one for each of the life cycle stages. You can buy them in, sounds like I'm selling them, I'm not, I'm just passing along the information. You can buy the hard copy books. The 2011 version is the current version. It just came out last year, even though this is 2013, but that's okay. They just came out last year. So the 2011 books are the current version. They're also available online. And actually, that's the way I would recommend, is get them with an online license. You can also get them electronically as in ebooks. The downside of the ebooks, and to be honest, this is voice of experience, is they're not kept up to date. So if you're interested in keeping up to date as OGC makes updates to the books and the various corrections, if you get the online version, a subscription to the online version, you automatically get all the updates. So I think that that's where I'm going to stop. So questions? I wanted to leave. ISO 20,000.
How does this all tie into that? We're going to talk a little bit about that. Can you make some comments there?
Yeah, so ITIL provides, the question is how does ISO 20,000 fit with ITIL? Is that accurate? So ISO 20,000 actually breaks into detail what many of the deliverables are and how to go about doing it, what some of the governance is that you need to have in place. So ITIL is a framework, and it will speak in broad generalities. ISO 20,000 totally has exactly the same processes, but it breaks it into the details. And then because it breaks it into the details, you can then get certified. Your organization can get certified, ISO 20,000 certified. I'm not aware that you can get ITIL certified. Okay, other questions?
In your strategy, how does disaster recovery kind of business strategy? Businesses rely heavily on IT processes and personal information. You got the security and disaster recovery.
Right.
How does this play into? Excuse me. Where in that framework we just discussed with all these
right. So the question was, where do disaster recovery, security, other things along that line fit in strategy? And actually they would fit into design. And so strategy will provide high-level business objectives, if you will, very high-level business requirements of what the services need to do. It's not the role of portfolio to dive into any kind of details around that. Service design will tease that stuff out and understand then around availability, what are my availability requirements? If I really don't care, then I could probably put it on some slow servers. If the business need is greater, then I may put it on faster servers. If it's critical, then I may go into high availability within a single data center. If it's super critical, I may go into high availability in different data centers in different parts of the country. So that's what the availability is speaking to. Disaster recovery then would be part of the service continuity aspect. So ITIL doesn't like to think in terms of disaster recovery, but it would be the service continuity. And so the business is interested in that service being met. The business doesn't care if you've got if your data center just went up in flames. So how does the business continue to operate without that service being available? And as I've worked with this, one of the things I've discovered is I think I had thought just in terms of service continuity. But what I've come to realize is that service is made up of probably lots of sub-services, probably lots and lots of components. And so when I start to think about service continuity, it's not just what if that service isn't available, but what if this component of a service isn't available? How can I work around that piece that may not be operating? So each service has a service owner, and he or she that should be one. Each service owner then should make sure that I understand if the service goes down, if any of the components go down, what are the plans for providing whatever that service does. So Elizabeth, you started.
Yeah, most of us have had experience with help desk queues, either within our companies or with companies that we're doing business. I'm just curious, what would be some examples of a help desk scorecard for within the ITIL framework? What kind of metrics would be on that dashboard?
Yeah, so there would be the question is what would scorecards dashboards look like for the service desk? And so it kind of depends on what level we're talking about. If I'm looking at it from an operational perspective specific to the function service desk, then it may be the number of incidents that were logged, resolution time or SLAs, OLAs met, those kinds of things. Those are kind of operational things. And as I've worked with service desks, that is what they're interested in. And their people are measured on that. And so what happens is they start off kind of slow. This is my own experience. They start off kind of slow. They don't know what they're doing. But they build up a knowledge database. And as problems come in, they can go to the knowledge databases and the resolution times drop. That's at an operational level. The service desk then in turn is supporting all sorts of sub-services and higher level services. And so those numbers would roll up into finally what the business needs. And so I don't care if I'm a business person trying to get a purchase order out. I don't care. I don't care necessarily at an operational level about the service desk. I got to get my purchase order in. Okay, over here.
There's a couple things with that. One, you talk about services. More and more people, everybody's got their iPhones here. Everybody's got their tablets. Basically, bring your own device.
Right.
Critical change of IT, of being able to basically say people want to have their own personal devices and they want to have those services available on those devices,
right,
including for their company or whatever they're doing.
Right.
So where would ITIL fit in with this and trying to bring together, an email service? You talk about collaboration.
Right.
Well, how do I hook in Gmail and all this other stuff? Because that is how people are starting to blossom.
Right.
Not attached to their corporate email servers anymore.
Right.
So how would
Yeah, so I can answer again at a couple of different levels for that. So the question is, with bring your own device coming into play and people having iPhones and Blackberries and whatever else, and the new Windows 8 devices and whatever else, how can I work at home, work in the office, and get information, and how does all of that fit into ITIL? And so the couple of levels, or a couple of views on that. One would be as applications are developed, such as email, then that would be part of the functionality that's needed. And so this would be a reason why a company would outsource their email. It'd be very expensive for an individual company to keep up with every device, every technology that's coming up in which I could read my email. Very hard for an individual company to do that. However, there are companies out there that specialize in it. And so that one company, the external company, can say, we're going to keep up on all of the new devices that are coming up, and we'll provide this as a service. And because we're doing it for 100 companies, 1,000 companies, we can do it much faster, much cheaper than you can do it internally. And so one level of that answer would be that it's by application or by service. Okay? It needs to be built into the requirements. The next level would be, from an ITIL perspective, how do I have a centralized tool to manage my incidents, my changes, my problems? How do I do that with my own device? And again, especially with the cloud-based tools, they are geared for multiple devices. And so a technician, he or she may have a device and can pull up, okay, well here are the incidents that have been logged, and I can see them, and they're all in building 85. And so when I go to 80, as a technician, on my iPhone, it's geared for my iPhone. I can see what all my stops are, and I handle it that way. So there's kind of the ITIL level of the centralized tool, and then there are the applications and the services and building the requirements.
It almost sounds like the help desk, you talk about centralized help desk.
Right.
You now to have all the capabilities going out and talking to Google and Apple and Microsoft and all those stuff to figure out for the customer, the
right.
user,
right.
how to fix their.
Yeah, and right, yeah. What did we do before Google? No, that's absolutely true. I saw some hands back here. We've got a couple minutes left. Any other questions? Yes.
In this ITIL structure that you presented to the services and so forth, you have a combination of the business needs and service with the service desk and so forth. You get into the higher level, you get into governance. I'm kind of curious as to what you can say about how the governance works between the service entities and the business entities.
So the question is, how does how does service governance interact with the business and with IT?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So each service would have a service owner, and that service owner is responsible for working with the business, working with IT, and so there's a lot of liaising that happens. With ITIL 2011, the new version that just came out, in service portfolio, in service strategy, there's a new process called business relationship. And so that's speaking to that linkage directly back to the business. Are we meeting your needs and having that communication? Yeah. Is that answering your question? Okay. Anything else?
What industry did ITIL come out of? Usually these frameworks or these concepts come out of a particular industry due to a need.
Right, yeah. So the question is, what was the originating industry that sparked ITIL? Great question, and I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. Okay. Well, it's been an honor and a privilege. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
And in the absence of any other business, we are adjourned.